two spiritualist channelers or mediums or whatever you want to call them that I personally like to listen to, and I have learned a lot and benefited from a lot, are Abraham Hicks and Anthony William, the medical medium. But even though I'm a fan of both of them, they say some contradictory things, right? Say some things that can't really be reconciled, like they're very different teachings. And it kind of begs the question, okay, who's right and who's wrong? Or are they both wrong? Or like, what's going on here? And this is a problem that we kind of have with spiritualism in general. So for example, the medical medium, Anthony Williams, says that when we pass, like when some people pass on, they turn into demons, or they turn into like suffering spirits. And the Abraham Hicks says that after we pass on, we all go to this perfectly happy, blissful place, and there's no more pain and suffering at all. And so they're obviously contradictory teachings, and the question is like, which one is right and which one is wrong? And so I want to give some background on that. This is kind of a problem with spiritualism in general, is we have all these different spirits and all these different mediums, and sometimes they say contradictory things, and it's like, oh, well, which one do I believe? So the problem comes in that when you have a spirit that is speaking through you, and both the medical medium and Abraham Hicks both have one particular spirit that talks to them all the time. And I should say Esther Hicks, right? Esther Hicks is the medium, Abraham is the spirit. And then the medical medium has the spirit that calls itself spirit of compassion. So it begs the question, okay, like what's going on here? So there's a few different possible failure points here. And this is something that was studied extensively in the late 1800s by Allan Kardec and Leon Denis and some, like a group of actual scientists that decided to take this on. They saw all of these spiritualists. That's when the spiritualism was coming to be, essentially. It was coming to be, well, I mean, it's existed for centuries, but I mean, it's when it was starting to gain mainstream popularity. There were all these seances and Ouija boards and all this stuff that was going on, and they wanted to see what was behind it. And they found essentially that the spirit communications were often real, but not always, because it was this sensationalist thing. And so people that wanted a quick buck or wanted a quick, like 5 minutes of fame, would pretend to be mediums even though they weren't. So there's that. There's some people that are charlatans, whereas some people are legitimate. And then there's also somebody that is a legitimate medium, that just means that they're open to receiving communications of spirits. It does not mean that they can force the spirit to give a communication. And so that causes problems too, because people start seeing, they get these communications and they start seeing dollar signs. They're like, oh, I can sell this ability to people. I can say, come to me, pay me money, and I'll say I'll communicate what the spirits want you to know. The problem with that is that they can't control the spirits, and so somebody comes and pays them money and comes into the consultation room, and the spirit doesn't show up. Well, what do they do then? Well, then they usually, if they're honest, they'll just say, look, I'm going to give you your money back because the spirit's not showing up. But a lot of times it's difficult to do that, and so they just pretend. And so they act like they're having the spirit when they don't at all. So there's all of these different problems. And then to complicate this further, spirits are not necessarily trustworthy themselves. We tend to think, especially if somebody like Anthony William or Esther Hicks, they get this communication from beyond, is something that's pretty awe-inspiring, right? If that's ever happened to you, your natural inclination is going to be think, this is it. Like, this is the revelation. This is absolutely correct. The problem is, you're getting this revelation from one spirit that you think is absolutely correct, and the other guy is getting a revelation from another spirit that he thinks is absolutely correct, but they contradict each other. So, what do you do there? And the issue is that the spirits are not necessarily always right, because spirits are just human beings who have passed on. And let me caveat that by saying that there may be other spiritual entities that can talk through people, other than just human beings that have passed on, that I don't know in any detail. I think it might be possible, but as far as I have researched, I've never seen any evidence of that. There are spirits that are human beings who have passed on that will pretend to be something greater. And when I see like spirits that say that I am source energy, I am God, I am immediately doubtful. Now, is it possible that source energy or God is actually speaking through someone? I don't see why it wouldn't be possible, but on the other hand, it definitely raises alarm bells for me. It's like if some human being walks to you on the street and says, I'm the reincarnation of Jesus, or I am God incarnate. It's like, yeah, is that possible? Maybe, but are you gonna just kind of believe it offhand? Probably not. So this is what happens, is that spirits have all the same limitations as us regular incarnate human beings. They can be prideful, they can think in a too simplistic way, they can get sucked into ideologies, they can have a hard time admitting that they're wrong about something, they can lie, they can outright lie to you, and some of them do. Not all spirits are good spirits, and a lot of spirits are kind of in between. It's like, they'll tell a white lie here and there. And then, as if that wasn't complicated enough, there's another layer that is the medium, something that the spiritists, that's the Allan Kardec and the people that studied this in the 1800s, what they call animism, which is essentially that the medium, even if the medium is honest, the medium's own mind has some influence on the communications, which I think of as similar to a translation. So if you're, let's say you're interpreting for someone, and somebody says something in Spanish, and then you translate it and you say it in English. Well, your interpretation of that is going to color the English output somewhat, right? Because words, the words are not the territory, and I'm saying like the map is not the territory. The words are symbols. The words are just a way of trying to represent something abstract, and the way that one person will understand a word is different than the way another person will understand a word. And then when you're translating it, you're bringing another layer of difficulty on that, in that sometimes words don't translate 100% exactly. Like, words have almost translations in another language, but there's a different connotation. So that's what's happening a lot with spirits, is that they transmit an idea to a medium, and then the medium will turn that idea into words, and that idea is colored by the context of that medium's life and the things that they already believe, and all sorts of other things that will interfere with the purity of that message. So I tell you all of this basically as a warning to not say, okay, I like this medium, I follow this medium or this spirit, and so I'm just going to take everything they say at absolute face value, and I'm just always going to believe it, because it just, like, you're gonna face problems that way. And so what Kardec did in his movement was he took a whole bunch of different spirit communications from a whole bunch of different mediums, compared them all together, noticed the patterns, and figured out like what's going on, how do we know what to trust and what not to trust, and what are the things that all of the wise and well-intentioned spirits, and you can normally tell when somebody is wise and well-intentioned, right? If somebody can't string two sentences together, they're probably not that wise. And if they're telling you terrible things, like they want to hurt people and stuff, then they're probably not that morally evolved, right? So you can tell to some extent. So what are the things that these spirits agree on, and what do they disagree on? And once you find those patterns, then you can kind of start to structure a reality that's more likely to be accurate. So if you want to check that out, I'll leave some links in the description. It's really, really fascinating. There are 2 books in particular that I recommend, or 3 books actually. There's one called Into the Unknown, which is all about kind of the history of how they figured all this stuff out. There's one called The Spirits Book, which is a summary, like a bunch of questions that they ask to spirits that gives a summary of how the spirit world works. And then there's one called the Medium's Book, which is basically all about how spirit communication with mediums works. And they're all super fascinating, and I'll put those in the description. And if you found this helpful, I definitely appreciate it if you hit thumbs up, subscribe, etc., and I'll see you in the next one.